This is the beginning of my new construction series, which I'm going to be showing you new construction neighborhoods in East Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. Will begin in Tennessee. And then I'm going to go over what I know as a former builder agent. Now, what is a builder agent? Like, what's the difference? So when you go into a new construction neighborhood, you'll go to a model home and there's an agent there. That agent only works for the builder. They cannot, unless they have a different kind of situation or setup, which I don't know of any that do this really, unless it's like a parent company, meaning their parents own the company, the builder. I've only seen that be the situation where that agent can also sell other properties. They only sell that builder's product, okay? So with that, who do they work for? The builder. So if you go in and you're like, well, I'll just use that person. Now, hopefully they're ethical. They're not going to do anything to harm you or mislead you or any way. But who's their boss? Who do they still want to make happy? The builder. Even more important, usually, not always, but definitely in the state of Tennessee, the builder uses a builder contract, meaning their team, yes, of attorneys have drawn up this contract to favor the builder. It doesn't favor the buyer. They don't use typically the state contract that you would use if you went and bought an existing home just from a normal person. So know that you need to be able to have someone on your side that's looking out for your best interest. So again, I worked for a builder. I know how this works. It was my first job in real estate a billion years ago. But a lot of people sometimes think, oh, well, if I just go in and use them, I'll be able to negotiate more. No, that's not how it works. They've already allocated. Most builders do allocate so much funds to pay buyer agents, which would be me if I'm representing you as a buyer. They've already accounted for that. There's a few builders that say, no, we're not paying buyer agents. In that case, if you want representation, which I still would, I would still have representation. Even myself, I've been doing this for 15 years. If I moved to a different state, I would still have a local agent represent me, even if I had to pay them myself. And you're saying, well, I couldn't do that. I can't come out of pocket X amount of $1,000. We would figure that out. There's ways. I won't get into that. But usually, 99% of the time, the builder will pay us. So why wouldn't you have somebody represent you that's representing just you and not the builder? So other reasons that you need to have someone know that contract or be able to read that contract and decipher, hey, what does this clause mean? What do you mean that they can't have full inspections? Why? You know, if you didn't know to look for that, you would be missing out. And let me tell you a story as far as inspections. I always say have inspections. I don't care if it's new, a pre-existing house. I do not care. Have a home inspection. Don't skip out on that $400 to $600 roughly, unless it's a huge house, dollar inspection. Because I had a client, again, this is in South Carolina, it wasn't here. I was representing them. So I wasn't in this capacity the builder's agent. I was the buyer's agent. And they asked me, they said, look, it's new construction. It's a brand new house. I don't need a home inspection. And I said, I would not advise that. And I need you to know that I'm not advising it. And he was very diligent. He was an engineer. And he said, okay, I agree with your thoughts there. Let's go ahead and have the inspection. It was like $500. It came back, this brand new house, not even finished at the time of inspection. I mean, it was finished, but they were going through final clearance from the city, that the staircase was not to code. Now, could you tell this? And I'm pretty diligent with being able to feel when things are a little off and we need to get a pro in there to look at it. I had no clue. Nobody would have known it except an inspector who measured the treads. Now, you're probably saying, oh, come on, is that really a big deal? Oh, yeah. Here's why. That buyer already knew in 5 years he was going to retire and move out of the state. He wanted somewhere to live during that time so he's not wasting his money in rent. Smart move. When he went to sell that in 5 years, that buyer, if their inspector uncovered that those stairs were not to code, the buyer would have probably said, fix it or I'm out. But more importantly, even if the buyer said, I couldn't tell, I don't care, the lender who the buyer's using, the bank giving the buyer that money, would say, no, we're not funding that. It's not to code. We're not going to give you any money. So the house would basically have to be magically bought in cash, which usually cash buyers buy things at a discount. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, it's a snowball effect. So I went to that builder and said, you got to fix this. You got to tear the stairs out and rebuild them. And they were like, well, I said, what's the alternative? Now, then I play a little hardball. Well, a lot hardball. But I said, and if it's not to code, you have to disclose that to the next buyer. And he was like, yeah, we do. So they ate the $15,000 mistake, rebuilt the staircase. The inspector went back in, said, you're good. I mean, have inspections, big time. Also, there's clauses and stuff that you need to be aware of, or somebody needs to be aware of, to make sure that weird stuff's not in there. Okay, let's go with the big rule. First visit. So maybe you're saying, okay, I get it. I need to have an agent. I get it. But I haven't really picked an agent yet. There's somebody at church that says that they like this person, another person, their cousin's an agent. Pick whoever you want to. That's up to you. Just make sure they're a good agent and they've worked with new construction before. But let's say you go out on a Saturday and you're like, we got to go to Sam's and do this. And then you want to pop by this new construction neighborhood, stick your head in. But you don't really feel like talking with anybody. You just want to sip on your Starbucks, leave me alone kind of thing. Trust me, I get it. However, that agent walks up to you and says, hey, I'm Susie with blah, 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 and can I help you with anything today? No, we're just looking. Oh, well, can you fill this intake form out? And you do, and it says, do you have an agent? You skip over it thinking you don't want to talk to anybody, and you're just filling out what she's going to make you fill out so you can go look at the cool model home. If you don't put the agent that you want to represent you, when you write that contract, they can say, fine, you don't have an agent and we're not letting one in. You will not have representation. I've had that happen. I've also had somebody that my client, which I've had this conversation with, forget to tell this builder agent. Luckily, I called the builder agent and I said, look, these are my clients. I've worked with them from this time. I have a buyer agency agreement with them, because if you don't have that, it's a whole nother can of worms. You got to have it first showing anyway. And she said, well, we'll do that for you. We'll let you in just because we knew each other. They can ice you out. And trust me, the builder's a business entity. They will instruct them to do so. First visit, write your agent's name down and their contact information. Make sure of it. Just saying. Another question I get. Are there deals with new construction? Deals. Can you get closing costs? Can you get even a lesser price? And the answer is sometimes, yeah, I have gotten deals for clients. But that depends on supply and demand. What is it like in the area? If you're not where I am, I can tell you how it is in my area, but if they can't build them fast enough, like the demand is high, then they don't have to come down on price. They don't have to offer you incentives. They don't have to do anything. Now, if the reverse happens and there's more stuff going on, they may play hardball, and they usually do say there's not many incentives until someone like me says, really? Sure, because we'd be willing to do it if you could do this. Then they call corporate and all of a sudden there's some incentives. But just know that if it's a high demand time and they can't build them fast enough, you're going to have to probably go in at what they say. That's not to say that I'm not going to try, though. Another thing with what can be offered is closing costs and rate buy downs. And that's usually if you use the builder's preferred lender. Sometimes it's preferred either attorneys or title companies. Here in Tennessee, we do title companies. I've worked with attorneys in the past in a different state. So if you use theirs, a lot of times they offer those incentives because they operate in bulk and they have a deal with those people. I will say if those lenders are good, and I always make sure that they usually do beat other deals because they do so much volume with this builder. So that's a good point. If you aren't married to this particular closing company, attorney, lender, whatever, it's not a bad idea to go with their reputable lender. So, so in summary, in most cases, builders or sellers have already agreed to pay us, and we will know that up front. So representation costs you nothing. I mean, I wouldn't go to court and say, hey, I'm going to represent myself